When the Rebbe would quote something that's natural, if there was something in Torah that says the same thing, he would rather bring it from Torah, that this is the fact, rather than from nature. And I want to give an example from Lakutei Sichos, Chelik Yud Aleph, the first Sicha to Parshat Mishpatim. There, amongst the questions, the Rebbe asks the question, why does the Eved Ivri, he wants to stay more than 6 years, get punished that you have to make a hole in his ear? The din is that if a person didn't have any money and he sold himself as an Eved, he stays for 6 years. Or if a person stole and didn't have any money to pay, the Bezdin would sell him and he'd stay for 6 years. Then the Pasuk says, and what happens if he wants to stay further? Because he says, because the din is that while he's an Eved in the 6 years, the master could give him a Shivcha Knainis as a wife, and he would have children from her. And when he leaves her by the master. So if after 6 years he says, I want to stay because I love my wife and my children, you have to bore a hole in his ear, and he stays on for after 6 years till Yovel. And the question is, why do we bore a hole in his ear? Why does he get punished? If you'll say he's punished because he sold himself as an Eved, so the Rebbe says, but he probably sold himself as an Eved because he didn't have any money. And if he didn't have any money, how could you blame him for selling himself as an Eved? If you're going to say in a case where he stole and he was sold by the Bezdin, you also can't blame him. And here the Rebbe says, why can't you blame him? Because why did he steal? Probably because he didn't have any money. He was hungry. And the Rebbe quotes a Gemara. The Gemara in the Erevim says that anius, poverty, is ma'avir ha'odam al daitev al das keinei. Poverty can make a person go off his mind and off the mind of Hashem. So probably he stole because he was hungry, and the hunger made him steal, so you can't really blame him, so you don't punish him for that. And then the Rebbe even quotes a posik in Mishlei, where it says, Le'yavezu laganef ki yignev, L'mali nafshe ke'erev. Don't blame a Ganef for stealing. He probably was hungry and he wanted to fill his nefesh. So here we see that the Rebbe, where it was possible to bring a Gemara and a posik to something that's natural, he didn't just say because naturally we assume that he stole because he was hungry. He quotes a posik, he quotes a Gemara. And then when it comes to say maybe the reason we do this is because he wants to stay more than 6 years, the Rebbe says, how could you blame him? He said he loves his wife and his children. And the way the Sikha was written when it was given into the Rebbe, it said like this. How could you blame him for this? Because he's forced because he's connected to his wife and his children naturally. But the Rebbe crossed out those words, and the Rebbe wrote like this, that you can't blame him. Why? Because because on this love to your wife and children, the Pasuk says, Hu Omer Vayehi Hutzi V'Vayamet. He said, and it was, he commanded, and it became. And the Gemara in Shabbos Daf Kuf Nun Bey says that this goes, and that the Eibishter made that a person loves his wife and loves his children. So he quotes from a Gemara in the Pasuk that the love to the children is something very special, and it's there. And in the Hora, the Rebbe even quotes Rei Tanya Perik Memtes. Look in Tanya Perik Memtes. Shal Zeh Koi Hatzivei B'Krishma B'Chol Avavcha. That in Krishma, when we say you have to love Hashem with all your heart, that means to love Hashem more than you love your wife and children, because what you love with your heart is your wife and children. Because levave shalodem kshura ben betive, because the heart of a person is connected to his wife and children naturally. But where do we see that this is so? Not from nature. Because the Pasuk says, Hu amar vayehi hu tziva vayamet. And it's interesting, when the Rebbe wrote this, he underlined the word hu, the first time, Hu Omar Vayehi, and Hu, again, tziva vayam, underlined both. That's Hashem who made it. So since Hashem made this nature, B'meila, how could you blame him for wanting to stay with his wife? So here we see that the Rebbe could have just brought it stam that there is the way it was written originally in the Sikha when it was given into the Rebbe, that it's a natural thing, and that's why you can't blame him for naturally loving his wife and children. The Rebbe changed it. It's not because we see it from nature, because the Torah says so. Actually, we see later on in the Sikha, on page 96, there the Rebbe explains why Rasha brings Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai in this inyan. So the Rebbe says, because Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai's inyan was Torah, and therefore what the Rasha is trying to say by bringing Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai to show that even though al pi Torah, the person, what he did was right, nevertheless in this case we still have to bore him because we did was not 100% right. And the way it was written there in the Sikha before the Rebbe was Magia, it said like this, that it's trying to tell you that even though the Torah gave permission for a person to marry a wife, and the Torah knew that he would be connected to a wife, nevertheless the Torah said that after 6 years you should leave. And also the Torah knew that it's possible for a person to become poor and want to steal. Nevertheless, the Torah said, "Lei signev." The Rebbe changed these words, and this is what the Rebbe wrote here. He wrote that it tells you that even though the Torah tzifso loses isho, the Torah said you have to marry, va'omro, and the Torah said hu omra vayehi, as we said before, the Torah says that hu omra vayehi zu ava isha chulu kenal, that's the love that you have to your wife, etc. And still the Torah said that after 6 years you should leave. And also, when it says the second thing, that the Torah knew that you could be poor, and nevertheless the Torah said don't steal, the Rebbe changed it. Not that the Torah knew that you will get poor. The Rebbe said, "V'chein ha-Torah heidio," the Torah is meidia, says clearly, "Ki leyechdal evyein mikerav haaretz," that there will never not be a poor man in the land. And still it said leisignev. So you see here that wherever it's possible to base it on a posik or a Gemara, even though it's natural anyway, the Rebbe brings from the Torah and not from the nature.